Hi, my name is Shella Immel with the Big Life Project. I started the project to help people lead more meaningful, more joyful lives. And as part of that, I'm talking with guests about how they do it. My guest today is Maia Duerr. She is an entrepreneur, a consultant to small nonprofits, and she is passionate about helping people become agents of change. On Maia's Liberated Life Project website, the practical material world and the spiritual world combine in a really interesting, compelling way. Maia was also ordained as a Buddhist chaplain last month. She's talking with me today about finding meaning and joy in work. Maia, thanks for joining me.
Hey, Shelley, it's great to be here. And I really just so much appreciate your Big Life Project and all your inspiration and catalyzing for your audience as well. So,
well, thank you. Thank you. It's always fun to talk to people who are kind of on the same wavelength, and I feel that there's a lot of that with your project, the Liberated Life Project.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of good stuff over there.
Yeah, we're very kindred spirits.
Yeah, fun. Okay, well, so let's jump on in. We've all had jobs where we felt more alive and more excited to get up and go to work, and other jobs that have really just given us a paycheck or even drained us. It felt like a real drudge to go to work. And I love what you're writing about right now, your series on creating a liberation-based livelihood on your website. Mm-hmm. And the idea that it's work that pays the bills and consciously connects to that core purpose, that core intention that we have in our lives. I love that. That gives me chills just to think about that. So I'd like to start talking about that with you from a more personal angle. What is your core intention? And what does it look like when you consciously connect your core intention with your work?
Yeah. And also, I think I want to preface all that, Shelley, by saying, when I started to write that series, it's been a 4-week series, and it just ended up yesterday. So, it's the past month that I've been exploring this phrase that I actually just kind of invented on the fly, liberation-based livelihood. Mm-hmm. And I really, it just sort of came to me, that phrase, but I loved it because I felt like what I was trying to do was, there's so much on the internet that's about, work for yourself, make a lot of money, have freedom. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, that's part of it, but there was something that felt like it was missing to me in all that. And so I think one of the things that I discovered as I was writing that series, which was really fun for me, was that there's a way to think about livelihood where it's maybe not so outcome oriented. It's not about like, okay, I'm going to make $80,000, with my own blog and I can travel wherever I want. Although that might be part of it. But I think when I backed it up a little bit, what I saw for myself was that really what was most important was, that there was obviously enough money to sustain ourselves, that we don't want to be in a poverty mentality. But that wasn't actually the focus. It was really about connecting whatever is, our deepest values into whatever work that we're doing. And that could be, that we go into an office 9 to 5 days a week. That's not an evil thing in and of itself. But that there's a way of relating to whatever kind of work that we have that can be this phrase that I use, liberation-based livelihood. Mm-hmm. If we're doing it, from a place that's really coming from our heart, that's completely connected with our values and our mission in life. Mm-hmm. So that was the premise that I was working with when I came up with that phrase, and that was what I was exploring. And I think in my own life, can you ask me that question one more time? I veered off a little bit. What was your question?
I actually love it. And one of the things, I'll just stick in here really quickly. One of the things I loved on one of your posts was talking about different ways to do it. That, you can rearrange your whole life and have a brand new way of earning money and doing other things you need to do to connect to that intention. Or you can just bring that intention to whatever you're doing now that does pay your bills.
Right.
And there's a whole big spectrum.
Yeah. We don't have to think it looks just one way. There's a lot of famous bloggers out there right now who are really great about I'm location independent. Everything is in my life is just totally lined up for my freedom. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I think not all of us are going to fall into that category. So, it's a way to.
Yeah, and not all of us can at any given point in our lives. Yeah.
Right.
So the question was really, within that frame, and what does that look like for you? What is your core intention, and living that in your work as well as the rest of your life?
Yeah.
What does that look like?
Okay. So when I thought about my core intention for your interview, I realized that there were actually two different levels to it, and one is kind of a fairly generic level. And that's around, I mean, a lot of this is informed by, having a Buddhist practice and studying Buddhist teachings. And it's really simple. It's actually twofold. It's like, on one hand, it's to help alleviate suffering. There's so much suffering in the world. So, I feel like part of the reason why we're all here, or why I'm here anyway, is just to, find ways to soften that suffering for people, including myself. And the second part of that is to cultivate loving kindness. So that's pretty basic. But then there's another level of intention that feels like it's much more customized to me and who I am and my way of being in the world. And so on that level, I think things that are my core values and core intentions are around helping people to connect with each other, helping people to connect to themselves, so helping them to just learn about awareness practices that will help them get to know themselves better so that they can thrive in the world. And also there's a big piece for me, I don't know quite how to say this, but it's around building bridges between people. I am just a big fan of diversity and difference. And I really feel like one of the ways that I show up in the world and thrive is by helping people to appreciate the differences between them. I mean, part of my training, as you probably read, is as an anthropologist. So I feel like that's really kind of core to me, is that I love adventure, I love travel, I love getting to know people from all different cultures. And to me, the richness of our life on this planet is about like learning from each other in all the different ways that there are to be on the planet. So I think, my core intention is very specific around how do I help people build bridges between each other? How do I introduce folks who might not normally ever connect with each other, but there's, that I can see that somehow there's so much that they have to learn from each other. So those are some of my core intentions.
I'll just slip in that as an undergraduate, I studied sociology and anthropology, and I spent time overseas as well. And so I know that's part of why I say, ooh, what's Maia thinking about today?
Yeah.
I get where you're coming from.
Yeah, that's part of our resonance, I think.
Yeah. So that's what your core intention is, that, and I can see how that definitely is part of your work. If somebody is, trying to create a liberation-based livelihood, what are sort of the key things to look at for that? What are some of the key components?
Yeah. Well, thinking back on my life, I think, and as we mentioned before, like it's so much a work in progress. I mean, I'm not by any means all the way there. I'm just on a journey there. But, I think like one big component and probably the very first step is just learning what doesn't work for us. I feel like I probably spent the first 20 years of my professional life trying things out, that whole list of jobs that I had on my blog, trying so many different jobs out. For the first 10 years of my profession, I actually got my undergraduate degree in music therapy. So 10 years I worked in mental health systems. So I worked at a psychiatric hospital. I worked at outpatient settings. Some of that being a music therapist, some of it being like a counselor for people with schizophrenia, that kind of thing. And, I think when I first started out on that path, the reason why was I thought, when I was 18 and 19 and choosing a major, I thought that I wanted to help people and I really liked music. And all those things were true at the time. But I think as I got to know myself better and the years went by, what I started to learn was that desire to help people wasn't really coming from a very healthy place. And as a result, I was really burning out. But, that was like something I didn't know at the start of that journey. It just felt like, oh yeah. But, I think when we're young, so much of what we've learned is conditioned by our family and also by our culture. And that doesn't mean that it's ours. So I really think, for me anyway, I don't know if this is true for other folks, but I think, nearly all of my 20s and at least some of my 30s was about just living out that conditioning, and then at a certain point seeing it wasn't really working. Like, I had this job, but I wasn't really happy doing it, and then trying to kind of inquire, well, why would that be? Why am I not happy when I thought this is what I was supposed to do? So I think that's like the very first key component, is really beginning to kind of look at oneself and get to know oneself better beyond the conditioning that we got. And then start to identify, like, well, what is it that really does help me to thrive? What are my qualities, not things that I was told I was supposed to do?
Yeah, there's a really large amount of breaking down and unlearning and sort of uncovering and excavation that goes along.
Yeah, absolutely.
Before you can start necessarily seeing what
Right.
is it that I should be building up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really hard.
Yeah. And it's painful. I mean, I think it's painful to start seeing that and to start letting go of, ideas about who we thought we were or who people want us to be. So there's a pain that comes with that, but it's like a birthing pain, because at the other end, there's the liberated life, right? Yeah. It's a life that's really ours. It's not somebody's idea of who we are.
Yeah. Or even our old idea of who we are. It's
right.
The truer version.
Yeah. Well said.
So that actually sort of brings up a good point, which is, we're theoretically talking about a livelihood here, but really to pursue this kind of purposeful work, that's going to have a lot of ripple effects outside of whatever your work hours are.
Right, yeah.
Talk a little bit about that, Maia. How does that ripple out? What are the impacts in other parts of life if you're pursuing this kind of livelihood?
Well, I think it's really pretty simple. It's about happiness. Again, speaking from my experience, I wasn't a very happy camper when I was doing jobs that weren't lined up, either in part or fully with who I was. And I think that really affected, how I was in relationships with partners or friends. I was just grouchy and depressed, and I think that also there's that mentality of, and this is where I am going to kind of veer off into the, I feel really blessed right now because the structure of my work, for the most part, it has shifted to I work for myself, so I can set my own hours. I mean, when I had to go into an office and report to somebody else, and commute all the way across San Francisco to do it 5 days a week, there was also a level of exhaustion, just physical exhaustion that I felt too. So I think, to have my working conditions more under my control makes me a much happier person. So I'm more available for my partner. I'm more involved in community events. I just have more physical energy to do the things that I love. So that's another ripple effect.
Yeah, I'm sure there are lots.
Yeah.
You mentioned looking back over the long list. I love that blog post that you did with the long list of jobs that you have had over the years.
Yeah.
And for somebody from the outside, or even for you at certain times in life, there didn't necessarily seem to be a lot of continuity. But looking at it now, having brought your core intention, your core purpose into better focus, you see that differently. You can see a thread that runs through it. You can see how the ones that connected with that made you spark, and the ones that didn't sort of drained you. Yeah. But how did you do that? How did you get clarity around your core purpose? That's a really challenging thing for a lot of us, and me included.
Well, I'll tell you one thing I did about 2 years ago when I was, beginning to think about starting a blog. It was for pre-birth of the Liberated Life Project. And I was kind of in a big sort of, evaluation phase of my life around livelihood. How do I want to sort of tweak this? Some things felt right, but some things didn't. And I felt like I was having a hard time sort of seeing that. What was that pattern? What was the core intention? So one thing I did that was really helpful, I actually did a survey of my friends. I set up a, Google Docs survey form. And I got some of these questions from, at the time, I think I had just started doing Chris Guillebeau's Empire Building Kit. And there were a couple other places that I was learning from about, just how to refine one's business intention. But there were some really helpful questions that were suggested, and I added some more of my own. So I asked my friends, tell me, what do you see? You've known me over 5, 10, 15 years. Some people had known me through 5 of those different job changes. But I asked them, what's the pattern that you see here? What, if you were looking for somebody to help you with a project, and you thought of me, what kind of project was it that you were thinking of? So I really used my friends and colleagues and their perspectives to help me see the things that I couldn't see. And there were a lot of epiphanies that I got through that process that were really helpful, I think, in, helping me to kind of move to the next phase of my career trajectory.
That's so interesting. You really do. You see what you expect to see.
Right.
And sometimes you just need somebody else to point out a whole area that you weren't even conscious of.
Yeah. I mean, we can never see our back, right? So it's, you know, and we can't, I think when we're so immersed in our life, we don't always see the patterns that other people can see more clearly. So, yeah, I'd highly recommend that. It's, you know, a really good step for people to do if they're in this process of kind of questioning how you want to shape your livelihood.
Interesting. Really interesting. So that's part of what they can do in order to sort of get a more full picture of themselves. What else might you suggest, Maia, for sort of clarifying the inside view? You know, so that tells you, hey, look at this and look at this and look at this, and here's some epiphanies.
Right.
Well, then what? Okay, so now I know some stuff.
Yeah. Well, you know, I'm a big fan, as, you know, if you've spent some time on the Liberated Life Project, the tagline is freedom is an inside job.
Exactly.
So, you know, all the pieces of it that I write about, the livelihood, creativity, relationships, it's all really the foundation of all those is about our awareness of ourself. So I'm a big fan of awareness practices, you know, and for me that's been sitting meditation. For other folks it might be creativity, doing artwork, yoga practice, gardening even. But I think that it's really important for all of us to have some way of just deepening our relationship with ourselves, basically. And a practice is a wonderful way of doing that. You know, it's a way of relating to something that gives us insight about ourselves. You know, so ideally it'll be a practice that, you know, it doesn't mean that we're always going to be doing sitting meditation, but that it leads us to have more knowledge about who we are. It helps us to kind of bring clarity and insight and, you know, kind of calmness into our life. We learn how to work with our mind in a way that's productive. Instead of our mind controlling us and being, you know, ruled by our agitation and anxiety. So I just really encourage folks to, you know, find a way to have a practice in your life that you do every day. Whatever that is, you know, if it's like 20 minutes of yoga when you first wake up or meditation practice or, you know, creating a beautiful piece of artwork every day like my friend Lisa Wilson does on her blog, Life Unity. So I just think that's really key to that inside piece of getting to know ourselves and clarifying that intention as it relates to our livelihood.
Yeah, I think it's a challenging thing for a lot of people viewing that as something you do not just for yourself, which we tend to be trained to think of as selfish, but you do it to also be more true to who you are in the world, which is a really good ripple effect to put out there. But that's a tricky transition, and there's a lot of you know, facing your own, maybe your own shortcomings, you might see them, maybe just how you really are instead of how you thought you were.
Right.
Some self-forgiveness, some self-compassion, all that rolls in there. And if you're sitting with yourself,
right,
you got to face a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, and you know, so along with that, I think it's really important to have a supportive community and even a teacher to work with around that stuff, because it's true. I think, you know, especially when we're on the beginning of that path, whatever that awareness practice might be, it's almost like things get worse before they get better. You know, because we've slowed our minds down and suddenly it's like all this crap comes up. And so at that point, I think it's kind of cruel to expect yourself to go through it all by yourself. So it really helps to have some sort of spiritual mentor, a community of people to practice with, to just offer each other support and, you know, be able to kind of say, this is coming up for me. How have you gotten through this? So thank you for bringing that up. It is hard, and it would be impossible, actually, if we had to do it all by ourselves.
Yeah, I'm all about doing it all by myself, and I'm really trying to learn better.
It's a hard way to go.
It's not.
It's kind of like
recommended.
Kind of like trying to climb up Mount Everest with no oxygen.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. It's like you don't have to do it that way. You know, it's still going to be a climb, but there's ways to do it where you can support yourself on the climb.
Yeah, and get to support other people too, which is very self-affirming.
Yeah.
Well, Maia, thank you so much for taking the time to talk and share some of your insights and some of your own story and adding your voice to the Big Life Project. I really appreciate it. I've enjoyed talking with you today.
Thank you. Yeah, the questions really helped me to kind of see pieces of those answers I hadn't thought of before. So
yeah, conversation is good. All right. Well, thanks so much.